let's go for a ride. Let's go. Oh boy, when you go on the book tube, you better not be stupid. Alright. We need cigarettes, ladies and gentlemen. I run on hard literature, art house films, and nicotine. So that's what we're gonna do right now. I'm gonna get me some cigarettes. And I'm gonna talk about the Book of Blood, Volume 1, 1984, Clive Barker. It's got some of my favorite stories in the first volume. Yeah, Clive Barker is one of my favorite authors of all time, if not my complete favorite. And in this series, we're going to be covering every single book that Clive Barker ever, every single book he ever wrote, every single movie his name's ever been attached to, his plays, his, we're gonna look at his paintings, we're gonna analyze and deconstruct those. But today, it is the Books of Blood by Clive Barker. And it's gonna be a lot of fun. So, the Books of Blood opens on, I guess, the frame story. It's the shortest story that there is. And, it's quite a way to enter the book. I thought that the first story was wonderful, set the tone beautifully, because you get a lot of the motifs that will reoccur through these first 6 stories in Volume 1 of Books of Blood. You get the supernatural, of course, and as Clive Barker has said many, many, many times, he doesn't believe in anything supernatural. He uses them all as overarching metaphors, as overwhelming metaphors for something very, very real about us all, and hopefully something universal in a Jungian way, that we all have this kind of collective unconscious when it comes to what we fear. And he uses the supernatural to get those out there, and I would agree, because biblical metaphors are the only things that don't have to be modernized, right? Other fears do have to become more modern unless you're using biblical themes. So, you could be afraid of atom bombs, of the apocalypse, and you could show that in a variety of different ways through fiction. But the best way to do that is to talk about the Book of Revelation, because that never misses its mark. So using supernatural metaphors, as Barker does, is brilliant, and I would argue the most potent symbols you could possibly use. And that first story is demonic, it's ghostly, it involves a little boy, not a little boy, he's, probably just a young man, jerking off in an attic above, pretending that he can talk to spirits, and writing things on the wall that Mussolini and Hitler and some nobodies would say, but he's a grifter, he's a con artist. And there's a scientist downstairs, and she's remarkably fascinated with this boy, and we get the erotic motif immediately. That kind of stuff that we're too afraid to admit that we're into, and it's really our attractions. You see, Clive Barker has been loved and praised and worshipped and evaluated and analyzed over what people find repulsive about his work. But I think what's repulsive about his work is really him exploring our attractions as human beings. So it's more when he goes into attractions, when he starts talking about what attracts us at our most primal, most indistinguishable, impenetrable, unexplainable level. And that's where you get the true repulsion, the true disturbances of Clive Barker. And this just recurs several times, and it's just a small part, small symbolic, symbolist elements in his books. And the woman's obsessed with the young boy upstairs. She wants to fuck him hardcore, and crack opens, all these ghosts come in because it's located at an intersection on the highway of death, and they're all walking to be judged. But it ends with a beautiful scene where, hey, what the fuck are you? A beautiful scene where the boy has now been actually, real ghosts have actually set upon him now, and they're all writing on his skin, turning him into a true book of blood. And when this carnage has ended, You get the idea that we now have a translator who is the scientist who's infatuated with this now permanently scarred, misfigured, deformed boy. And these are all different tales that make up every millimeter of this boy's body, from the ghosts that have scorched his skin. And everybody is a book of blood. Wherever we're open, we're red. So that's a great frame story, and that's really cool, because then you could look at the Books of Blood as not simply a collection of short stories, but as a novel of sorts. It's a truly gothic, truly disturbing, truly subversive novel, and Barker has said that he really wants to write subversive material that challenges his audience, and he thinks that he has a sophisticated audience. I like to think that I'm partly sophisticated. So let's jump into it. The second story is The Midnight Meat Train. And I gotta tell you, it's probably the best story he has. It's one of my ultimate favorite Clive Barker stories. The Midnight Meat Train is incredible. So let's jump into it a little bit. I'm not gonna go into every story and just spoil everything, but because I'm assuming that if you're holy shit, man, fuck this camera. I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you've already read the Books of Blood, because it's far more satisfying to actually read Clive Barker's prose, which is excellent and beautiful, and partly like Fitzgerald. It kind of reminds you of like a great prose. I mean, Poe would be drooling at the mouth right now if he could read it. By the way, got cigarettes in that time frame and that jump cut. Jump cuts. You don't know what happens in a jump cut. Shit. But I'm assuming that you've read the story before watching this video. So, yeah, I'm not going to go into every detail. But the coolest thing about The Midnight Meat Train for me is that it centers around Leon Kaufman, who is... Maybe this is bad to say, I don't know. I don't think it is, because Clive Barker is all about confronting your fears, but your fears are truly your attractions, not your repulsions. Your true fears are like your shadow archetypes, like who you could see, the worst you could see yourself doing, or the things about you that attract you to something that you can't explain. So Leon Kaufman is actually the most relatable Clive Barker character for me, one of the most relatable, easily. And Leon Kaufman, the way he talks about how he's not in love with that city anymore, he's totally disenchanted by it. Clive Barker's excellent prose of, like, New York City is awful. It wakes up every morning and has to just brush the fucking suicides and all misdeeds out of its hair. You know, out of its clogging, like, knotted hair. And it's beautiful. Obviously, it's about a serial killer who's been, torturing people on subway trains, leaving them hanging upside down, completely hairless and completely just gutted, you know, autopsied. And Leon Kaufman, of course, finds himself on one of these trains, and he's so cynical, Leon Kaufman. And he's Jewish. They make a point of saying that a lot, so maybe that's also why I relate so heavily to him, because he's a very well-written, modern Jewish cynic, and that's what I am, if you kind of pare me down to my complete base characteristics. But yeah, well, the short and skinny of it is, well, it gets into these crazy Clive Barker supernatural motifs and elements of this guy's been killing people for, oh my god, for this unseen subterranean group of gods, really, that they're called the Fathers, and they're decrepit looking, but those are the new Fathers. The old Father is something that's been here before America, before New York City. It's the true heart of the city, and I think that's why, you know, the human brain, Leon's brain, can't really unravel what he's looking at in front of him, because he says it looks like a bunch of just fish swimming. I think that's just the beating heart of New York City, and Leon Kaufman is growing to understand its divinity. And he takes up the mantle. He gets his tongue ripped out so he can no longer speak. You know, he can no longer blaspheme the great God that is his city. And it ends with him on the sidewalk kissing the ground, and how his city just loves the praise, loves the worship. That's incredible. That's incredible. That's super poetic, and it's also super American notions. You know, you have to be reminded of the way that Michael Mann framed cities in his uniquely American films. The idea of a city as a sentient creature, which we'll also come to before the end of this video in a whole new literal way, but the idea of a city as a modern industrial city as a breathing, alive thing is a super uniquely American concept, and Clive Barker kind of deconstructs that romanticism, because it's usually romantic. It is usually fatalistic as well, but Barker deconstructs it and adds a supernatural cosmic pessimism to it, and a cynicism that is so truthful and so scary at the same time. The Midnight Meat Train, which was it made into a movie in 2008 starring Bradley Cooper and Benny Jones. Never seen it. We will watch it on this channel and talk about it. Leon Kaufman is one of my favorite Clive Barker characters. And then we move on from that to the Yattering and the Jack, which is hilarious. It's a black comedy about a demon, a lower level demon, who has been assigned with the task of making a guy called Jack Polo forfeit his soul because of some deal with his mother that fell through, where she went back on, betrayed Beelzebub. And it's hilarious because, you know, Jack Polo's in on it, but he has to pretend he plays dumb, that he just, oh, 5 of my cats are dead, the oven's alive. Oh, whatever will be, will be. And it's actually so fucking funny. It's hilarious book, and I love the ending. Ironic, twisty ending. It's like a, it's like at the Twilight Zone, where, had an episode directed by Danny DeVito and written by Clive Barker. It's actually quite a hilarious book. That's a hilarious story right there. Then we move on to Pig Blood Blues, which is fucked up, as you can guess. If you go into a Clive Barker story and the title has a pig and then blood in it, you're like, oh, I'm sure this is gonna be delightful. Yeah, yay. That'll just be like loads of fun. Pig Blood Blues. I'm not gonna go into the story really, because it's about like teens who who transfer souls into a pig, you know, to live forever. But that's a supernatural element, and Clive Barker is all about symbolism, all about metaphors to describe greater truths. So, and he's also the most important writer in queer horror. One of the most important modern queer horror writers ever. So his queer horror, he says a lot about it in all of his books, including this first volume of Books of Blood, where Clive Barker first made a name for himself. So Pig Blood Blues, at its core, is about it's about repressed homoeroticism, and it's about how violent that repression can manifest itself if it's not directly tackled, if it's not directly confronted. It takes place at an all-boys reformatory or a juvenile delinquency place, really. And the true horror of it is the main character, Redmond's attractions for these boys. And it's not dwelled upon. Clive Barker just simply writes it in there. And also the female therapist in there has thoughts of her own about these boys. But it's Redmond's that lead to his ultimate destruction. It's Redmond's repressed homoerotic fantasies that lead to delusions of grandeur, that lead to him being the hanging martyr with young boys kissing his life away. I mean, the metaphor is pretty loud, pretty heavy, and unmistakably terrifying. All right. And the next story is Sex, Death, and Starshine, and I think it is amazing. Another incredible story. There's a lot of moments of dark humor as well. So the Yattering and the Jack and Sex, Death, and Starshine have that in common. But Sex, Death, and Starshine has so much, if you are of a very specific mindset, then that story is terrifying, as I am. I live for understanding, viewing, making, and appreciating art. Clive Barker is reaching into that part of me and kind of exposing it for the true shallowness that it is, even though I think it's sophisticated and that I think it makes me a whole person. Clive Barker is saying, no, it doesn't. It actually makes you incredibly shallow. It makes you so shallow that you're lifeless. If you want immortality, you want something immortal. All artists want the same superficial thing, to become immortal and then die. I hate everyone sometimes. Hate everyone. Alright, no lie, I have deaf neighbors. That car alarm went off for about 20 minutes. But yes, as the architects of the French New Wave would tell you, the goal of any self-absorbed artist, which every artist is self-absorbed, would be to become immortal and then die. And Clive Barker, I don't think he's aware of that quote in particular, but he's certainly positively cognizant of the concept and just bears that all for us. There's ridiculous things, because if you live for sex, if you live for art, if you live for any of those so-called staples of successful culture, then you're actually living a shallow existence, and it's better performed by the dead. Art is better performed, better received, and better suited for the dead, which is incredible. That's an incredible story, yeah. In fact, actually, Sex, Death, and Starshine is my second favorite short story in this first volume. Midnight Meat Train is incredible. I would love to become a mute servant of my city, so lovingly devoted to it that I can no longer speak. I'm just possessed by my fathers. Whew. See, everything I just said has a symbolic reverence, a symbolic meaning, a symbolic purpose, a metaphorical, lyrical reasoning applied to it. But Sex, Death, and Starshine is so good, so amazing, and I think it only work as a short story as well. So that's one of the beautiful parts of that story. It only works as the written word, the way shit should be. And then the last story is In the Hills, the Cities. And I think that this is Clive Barker's strongest statement on queer horror, on queerness, on politics in this book. It's a wonderful story. It's like if Neil Gaiman took 5 million sleeping pills and was on the verge of killing himself. This is like some kind of nonsensical nightmare that Neil Gaiman would have. But of course he actually couldn't, because this comes from a place of true queer horror. It's about a couple, Judd and Mick, just exploring the Yugoslavian countryside, but deep in the hills in some kind of weird pocket dimension that no one ever sees. Two cities are battling each other, but they are cities of humans. They are all human. People all came together to form this one gigantic colossus with pulleys and strings and ropes, and it's men, women, and children, infants, all in this one glob, this one colossus, and they're all battling each other, and they're murdering each other, and they're dying. And Mick and Judd accidentally witness this carnage, witness this miracle. I think as Clive Barker puts it quite wonderfully, is that they just take in the sight because that's all that they can do now, because after this would just be simple existence. And they are content to be blotted out after that. So what is Clive Barker saying in that story? Because that's actually probably the most challenging story in this book. It's not nearly the most disturbing. The most disturbing book is probably Pig Blood Blues, because of the grotesque, repressive undertones of that story. But what is he trying to say in the Hills, the Cities? Because there's certainly a political undertone to it, because it opens and closes. It's paralleled. It is bookended by showing the couple's different political belief stances, where they lean towards. Mick is certainly on the left, and Judd is described as being to the right of Attila the Hun. And it's ended with another kind of nuanced, subtle reference to Judd's politics as Judd is decomposing and becoming part of the collective. So it's individualism versus the collective. But it's a horrifying look at it, though, But I think that Clive Barker is saying it's inevitable. It's the inevitability of the collective that will decompose you. If so, that's an insanely scary statement to make, and I think that book is a nightmare story for leftists like myself, because it shows you the true horrifying climax, the bloody brutality, the Holocaust, the self-fulfilling Holocaust of bounding yourself to a collective. Because that has to be it, because that's how that entire story is truly framed, because we are given no purpose, given no reasoning other than that it's beautiful that all these people decided to come together in some sort of synchronized Holocaust, some sort of well-coordinated and synchronized mutual destruction. Queer horror is an important thing to express, because queer writers, of course, try to express different mores, different values, and different viewpoints. It's an incredibly important thing to express. And also, queer horror is far more in touch with sexuality, not just in a way that they're more comfortable talking about it, but of course they are, but they are far more in tune with the repressive things that truly drive us insane. Those things I was talking about, it's not what repulses us, but what attracts us. Our attraction is repulsive. It's not just repulsion. Repulsion is born out of attraction. Or else our psyches wouldn't think so highly of that repulsive object in the first place if we weren't so attracted to it on some sort of Jungian, Freudian, or just deeply primal human mythological level. And queer horror is far more in tune with that, because especially in the mid-'80s when this novel came out, and I mean, sadly certainly true to this day, queer people in general have more experience with repression, with having to repress your true identity, your desires, and your eroticism, your sexuality. And that can manifest itself into some of the most beautiful media in the world, including Clive Barker's books of blood. It's really Clive Barker's prose that makes it so unforgettable. Like, In the Hills, the Cities, the way he talks about the collective, the two colossus, the aftermath, the ruins, the bloody, grotesque, coagulated gore that is the ruins of all these people, entire cities worth of people, as flesh swastikas stamped out. I mean, my God, it's incredibly striking, because it's the exact perfect image, the exact perfect object, the ideal metaphor for that idealized form of dread that we all have in our heads. And I think that basically covers Volume 1 of Books of Blood. We're going to be covering Volume 2 here in a bit. I'll put up another video. We're going to do, like I said, we're going to do Volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Books of Blood. And then we're going to move on to Imagica. That'll be the next one we do. We want to get his own Colossus out of the way. And I'm loving Books of Blood. I don't remember, because I'm on the fence about whether or not Books of Blood or Imagica is truly Clive Barker at his ultimate best, because both are two of the most incredible books ever written. And I do actually call Books of Blood a novel. I really like the frame story, that initial story, that you are reading all these tales from the dead, but all off of the skin, the grotesque parchment that is this young con artist boy turned bloody medium. And you're being told it, translated it by a woman of incredibly repressed desires and unknown dread. Yeah, Books of Blood is amazing. Name is Zachary Conan. Thank you for watching. We'll be doing Volume 2 next week. I believe 5 stories in that one, so that's going to be fun. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you for watching, and yeah, we're going to do every Clive Barker thing. It's going to be amazing. And remember, everybody is a book of blood. That's a sign-off. That's my sign-off.